Dance tango with me and I'll give you 2 million. They laughed, but she danced like a professional. Sarah Miller felt her legs tremble as she balanced the crystal tray laden with canapes. The ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel was filled with the most powerful business people in New York City, celebrating the 50th anniversary of billionaire Julian Sterling's Sterling Global Construction. That's when her eyes met those of a blonde woman in a white dress who stared at her with disdain. Sarah quickly looked away, trying to focus on her work, but the heel of her borrowed shoe chose that exact moment to give way. The tray flew into the air, the canapes scattered across the marble floor, and the sound of shattering crystal echoed throughout the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the laughter began. First quiet, then louder, until the entire ballroom seemed to be enjoying her misfortune. "My God, what a disaster!" exclaimed the blonde woman, covering her mouth with a gloved hand. "Who hired these people?" Sarah felt her face burn with shame. At 45, with 3 jobs and mounting bills to pay for her diabetic mother's treatment, she couldn't afford to lose another job. She quickly knelt to pick up the shards, but a male voice interrupted her. "Leave that," said Julian Sterling, approaching with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I have a better proposal for you." The businessman was an imposing man with broad shoulders and perfectly combed grey hair. His dark eyes shone with a cruelty disguised as amusement. Sarah stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her uniform. "Dance tango with me," continued Julian, gesturing to the small orchestra in the corner of the ballroom. "One whole song, non-stop, without stumbling. If you manage it, I'll give you $2 million. The ballroom erupted in murmurs. Some people laughed openly. The blonde woman, who Sarah now realized was Vivian, the businessman's wife, shook her head in disapproval. "Julian, for heaven's sake," whispered Vivian. "What kind of joke is this?" "It's no joke," he replied, without taking his eyes off Sarah. "It's an investment in entertainment. I bet she can't even last 30 seconds. A white-haired woman, seated at the main table, adjusted her glasses to get a better look. Her name was Martha Higgins, and at 70 years old, she had been one of the most respected ballroom dance teachers in the United States. Something in Sarah's posture, even trembling with nerves, caught her attention. "And if I can't?" asked Sarah, her voice almost disappearing. "Then you leave here and never come back," replied Julian. "But if you succeed besides the 2 million, I'll pay for the Pinecrest Medical Center where your mother is being treated." How did he know about her mother? Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Julian Sterling was known for investigating the lives of everyone around him, but that didn't make the situation any less disturbing. "I accept," she said, surprising herself. The ballroom fell silent again. Julian signaled to the orchestra, which immediately began playing the first chords of Por una cabeza, the song that had marked her youth, that had been the soundtrack to her shattered dreams. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She could feel the mocking stares, the bets being placed on how long she would last. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Her posture straightened, her shoulders aligned, and for the first time in 20 years, Sarah Miller allowed the velvet rose to resurface. Julian extended his hand with an arrogant smile, expecting her to accept it hesitantly. Instead, Sarah grasped it with firmness and authority, positioning herself in the classic tango stance with a precision that made his smile falter. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the first steps were cautious. Julian still wore an air of superiority, convinced he was merely prolonging the waitress's humiliation. But as the music progressed, he began to sense something was wrong. She wasn't following his lead. She was anticipating his movements, and worse, she was subtly correcting him. "What?" he murmured, but Sarah silenced him with an intense look. In the audience, Martha had risen from her chair, hands trembling as she gripped her cane. Her eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. That precision, that elegance, that unique way of executing the ocho. "The Velvet Rose," she whispered to herself. "My God, it's the Velvet Rose." Julian's 25-year-old daughter, Tiffany, had taken out her phone to film what she expected to be a comedy. A digital influencer with millions of followers, she was already imagining the views this video would generate. But as she filmed, her expression changed. Comments were already starting to appear on the live video she had unknowingly started. "My God, this woman dances like a professional. What perfect movements. The businessman can barely keep up with her." Vivian watched everything with a mix of anger and disbelief. Her husband, who always made her feel inferior for not knowing how to dance, was clearly being outmatched by a simple waitress. With every move Sarah executed, Julian seemed more awkward. The music reached its first climax, and Sarah performed a series of spins that left the ballroom speechless. Her feet moved as if they had never stopped dancing, as if the 20 years of silence had been merely a long rehearsal for this moment. Julian began to sweat. He, who considered himself a good dancer, was being completely dominated by his partner. He tried to take control of the dance, but every time he forced a movement, she redirected it with such mastery that it seemed she was dancing alone. "Who are you?" he asked through gritted teeth, trying to maintain his smile for the audience. "Someone you underestimated," she replied, executing a move that forced him to take 3 steps back. At the main table, a man of about 60 dropped his glass of wine. Gregory Blackwood, a former dance show producer, immediately recognized the woman's unique style. The Velvet Rose had been the greatest promise of American tango in the 2000s, but had mysteriously disappeared at the peak of her career. "Martha," he called, nudging the retired professor. "It's her, isn't it?" "Yes," replied Martha with tears in her eyes. "My girl, my best student." The music was only halfway through, but it already felt like an eternity to Julian. His tuxedo was soaked with sweat, and he began to stumble over his own feet. The audience, who had initially laughed at the waitress, now murmured in admiration at her performance. Sarah, for her part, felt as if she were waking from a long nightmare. Each step reconnected her with who she truly was. For a moment, she forgot about the bills to pay, her mother at Pinecrest Medical Center, the years of hard work. She was once again the dancer who dreamed of conquering the world. Tiffany's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The video already had 50,000 views and the comments kept pouring in. "Does anyone know who this woman is?" "That's the Velvet Rose. I used to watch her shows as a kid. She disappeared years ago. What happened?" Tiffany, realizing the magnitude of what she was capturing, discreetly adjusted the angle to better capture the performance. She was certain this video would change her career as an influencer. Meanwhile, Vivian could no longer hide her irritation. She rose from the table and approached her husband, trying to interrupt the dance. "Julian, that's enough," she said. But he completely ignored her. In fact, Julian was beginning to become genuinely impressed. The initial shame of being outdone gave way to an intense curiosity. Who was that woman? How could a simple waitress dance like that? The orchestra, sensing something special was happening, began to play with more passion. The lead violinist, a man from the United Kingdom named Nathan, had worked with the best tango dancers in the world and immediately recognized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Sarah then executed the move that would become the turning point of the night, a gancho followed by a sequence of ochos cortados that demonstrated not only refined technique, but a deep understanding of the soul of tango. It was at this moment that Julian completely lost control of the situation. "Stop the music!" he shouted, breathless. But the orchestra continued to play, and Sarah continued to dance. Now alone, without the limitation of an inexperienced partner, she could show all her mastery. Every movement told a story. Every step was a work of art. The entire ballroom had fallen into absolute silence. Even the waiters stopped serving to watch that unforgettable performance. Martha was crying openly, remembering the days when she trained that talented girl in her studio. Gregory rose from the table and approached Martha. "Where has she been all these years?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," replied the professor. "After her daughter, after what happened, she simply disappeared. We never heard from her again." Martha's comment was overheard by some people nearby, and soon whispers spread through the ballroom. She had a daughter. What happened? Why did she stop dancing? Tiffany, still filming, realized she had uncovered a much bigger story than she imagined. The comments on the video were now speculating about the dancer's mysterious past. The music came to an end, and Sarah struck a classic tango pose, one leg bent, her arms in perfect position, her intense gaze fixed on a distant point. The silence that followed lasted at least 10 seconds, until someone began to applaud. Then another, and another, until the entire ballroom erupted in applause. Sarah held the pose for a few moments, as if savoring a moment she never imagined she would live again. When she finally relaxed, her eyes were moist, but the smile shining on her face was one of pure happiness. Julian, still breathless and disconcerted, stared at her with an expression that mixed admiration and confusion. "Who are you?" He repeated the question, this time with genuine curiosity. "I'm just a waitress who needs to get back to work," replied Sarah, bending down to pick up the pieces of the tray she had forgotten on the floor. "No," said Martha, approaching quickly despite her age. "You are the Velvet Rose, the greatest tango dancer this country has ever seen." The murmur in the ballroom grew. Some older guests began to remember the name from newspaper and magazine articles 2 decades ago. Sarah looked at the retired professor, and for a moment the two women stared at each other in silence. 20 years of pain, regret, and longing passed between them in a single glance. "Professor Martha," she finally said, her voice choked. "My girl," replied the elderly woman, extending her arms. The hug between the two was the most emotional moment of the night. Many guests, without fully understanding what was happening, felt tears in their eyes witnessing that reunion. Vivian, realizing she had completely lost the attention of her husband and everyone present, decided to take drastic action. "Julian," she shouted, "put an end to this nonsense right now. Get this woman out of here." But Julian wasn't paying attention to his wife. He was completely fascinated by the story beginning to unfold before him. "The Velvet Rose," he repeated. "I remember that name. You were famous, weren't you?" "That was another life," replied Sarah, trying to pull away. "Now I need to get to work." "No," said Gregory, stepping closer. "Gregory Blackwood. A pleasure. I produced several of your shows at the City Opera House. You can't just go back to work as if nothing happened after what we just witnessed." Tiffany, realizing she had captured something going viral, decided to approach as well. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, showing her phone. "But this video already has 500,000 views. People are desperate to know where you've been all these years." Sarah looked at the phone and saw the numbers climbing in real time. The comments were a mix of admiration, curiosity, and recognition. "The Velvet Rose is alive! Where was she? Why did she stop dancing? What an incredible performance! Please," begged Sarah, trying to move away. "I just want to leave." But Julian held her by the arm, not aggressively, but firmly. "No," he said. "You owe me an explanation. I accept that you made a fool of me, but now I want to understand who you really are." "She doesn't owe anyone anything," intervened Martha, protecting her former student. "The Velvet Rose has been through a lot. If she doesn't want to talk, we must respect that." Vivian, seeing she was being completely ignored, made a decision that would change the course of the night. "Security!" she shouted. "Remove this woman immediately." 2 men in suits approached, but were stopped by the indignant murmurs of the guests. The performance had touched many people's hearts, and they didn't want the night to end that way. "Wait," said a woman's voice from the back of the hall. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. An elegant woman, approximately 40 years old, approached. Sarah recognized her immediately, and her face paled. "Professor Rose," said the woman, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm Daisy Wright. You taught me to dance when I was 10. Sarah felt her legs tremble again, but this time it wasn't from nerves or shame. It was from an emotion she had tried to suppress for 20 years. "Daisy," she murmured. "My little Daisy." "You disappeared in the middle of our lessons," continued Daisy. "My mother could never explain why. I kept dancing for years, hoping you'd come back to see me compete." Sarah began to speak, but the words were lost. "She won the World Youth Tango Championship in 2010, said Gregory. "She was the first American to do it. She always said she learned the basics from you." Daisy nodded, moving closer. "I always dance with a photo of you in my suitcase," she said. "You were my inspiration to never give up." The emotion in the hall was palpable. Even people who didn't fully understand the situation could feel the emotional weight of the moment. Julian, realizing he had stumbled upon something much bigger than he imagined, decided to completely change his strategy. "Rose," he said, using the stage name for the first time, "I need to speak with you in private." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, still trying to process the reunion with Daisy. "Yes, there is," insisted Julian. "You won the $2 million more than fairly, but now I want to make a much bigger proposal." Vivian huffed in anger and stomped out of the hall, followed by a few friends. Her exit was practically ignored by everyone present. "What proposal?" asked Martha suspiciously. "I want her to open a dance academy," said Julian. "I'll finance everything: facilities, equipment, promotion. I want her to train the next generation of American dancers." "No," Sarah replied immediately. "That's not possible." "Why not?" asked Daisy. "Professor, you have a gift that can't be wasted." "You don't understand," said Sarah, her voice beginning to falter. I don't deserve." Martha approached and held her former student's hands. "My dear," she said softly, "what happened to Lily wasn't your fault." The name echoed through the hall like thunder. Sarah felt her legs give way and Daisy quickly steadied her. "Lily was your daughter?" she asked. Sarah couldn't answer. The tears she had held back for 20 years finally began to fall. "She was," answered Martha for her. "The most talented girl I ever saw. At just 16, she danced better than adult professionals. Mother and daughter were a perfect pair." "What happened?" asked Gregory, already suspecting the answer. "An accident," replied Martha, squeezing Sarah's hands. "Lily was returning from a rehearsal when—" "No!" cried Sarah. "Please don't speak of it." The hall fell into a respectful silence. Everyone could feel the deep pain of this woman who had carried that burden alone for so long. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Tiffany, sensing the sensitivity of the moment, stopped filming and put away her phone. Even as an influencer used to capturing every moment for social media, she understood that some things were too sacred to share. "Professor," said Daisy gently, "you can't stop dancing because of the pain. Lily wouldn't want that." "You don't know what you're talking about," replied Sarah, trying to pull away again. She's not here to say what she would or wouldn't want." "But I am," said a voice that made Sarah freeze. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A woman of about 60, with graying hair and kind eyes, approached slowly. "Who are you?" asked Julian. "I'm Evelyn Wright," the woman replied. "I was Lily's best friend." Sarah turned slowly, as if seeing a ghost. "Evelyn," she whispered. "Hello, Velvet Rose," said Evelyn, smiling through tears. "It's been a long time." How did you know I was here?" "I saw Daisy's video," Evelyn explained, pointing to the young woman who had stopped filming. "She's my daughter. When I saw you had returned to dancing, I knew I had to come." Sarah looked from Evelyn to Daisy, processing the information. "Daisy is Evelyn's daughter." "Yes," confirmed Daisy. "And my mother always told me about my dance teacher's daughter, about how the two of you were inseparable, how you danced together, how Lily admired you." "Velvet Rose," said Evelyn, moving closer. "Lily gave me something to keep, something she wanted you to have if anything ever happened to her." "No," said Sarah, shaking her head. "I don't want it." "She made me promise," insisted Evelyn. "She said if you ever stopped dancing, I should give this to you to remind you of who you really are." Evelyn took from her bag an envelope yellowed with time. Sarah immediately recognized her daughter's handwriting. "Please," she begged, "don't make me read this now." "Lily was a wise girl," said Martha. "Perhaps she left exactly what you need to hear." Julian, sensing the delicacy of the moment, signaled for everyone to step back a little, giving Sarah some privacy. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Lily's careful script. "My dearest Mum, If you're reading this, it means something happened to me and you stopped dancing. I know you'll stop because I know you. You'll think it's your fault, that you don't deserve to be happy without me. But I need you to know that my greatest joy was seeing you dance. Not with me, not for me, but you dancing. You have a gift that comes from your soul, and this gift doesn't belong to you alone. It belongs to the world. Promise me you won't let your pain kill your passion. Promise me you'll keep teaching other girls like me, who dream of dancing like you. I will always be with you with every step, every turn, every song. Don't stop dancing for me. Dance for me. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Your eternal dance partner, Lily P.S. If you don't start dancing again, I'm going to be very angry with you from up there in heaven. Sarah read the letter 3 times before tears prevented her from continuing. When she finally looked up, she saw the entire ballroom watching her with expressions of understanding and compassion. She knew, whispered Sarah. Lily was always more mature than her years, said Evelyn. She gave me this letter 2 days before the accident, as if she knew something was going to happen. It wasn't an ordinary accident, said Martha, breaking a 20-year silence. Lily was going to get a present for your birthday. She wanted to surprise you with something special, to celebrate landing the contract with the company from London. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering that terrible day. The contract I never signed, she murmured. The contract you didn't sign because you were destroyed by grief, corrected Gregory. I was there, remember? You were the most promising dancer in the United States. That contract was going to make you known worldwide. Without Lily, none of that mattered, replied Sarah. But Lily wanted it to matter, said Daisy, approaching again. Professor, I've studied your career for years. You revolutionized tango in the United States. You brought techniques from the United Kingdom, created your own style, trained dancers who are now all over the world. And abandoned it all, Sarah finished bitterly. To suffer in silence, said Julian, surprising everyone with the sensitivity of his comment. But suffering doesn't honor the memory of those we've lost. Living does. Sarah looked at him in surprise. The arrogant man who had tried to humiliate her earlier in the evening seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone genuinely moved by the story he had discovered. Why do you care? She asked. Because, said Julian, looking around the ballroom, I've spent my whole life building buildings, accumulating money, buying respect. But today, watching you dance, I realized I've never built anything that touched people's souls the way you did in 3 minutes. 4 minutes and 23 seconds, corrected Nathan, the violinist, and they were the most beautiful minutes of music I've ever played in my life. Sarah smiled for the first time since the letter was read. Lily loved Por una cabeza, she said. She said it was the most romantic song in the world. She was right, said Evelyn, and she would be proud to know you danced to it again. I didn't come back, Sarah protested. It was just a moment. It was a perfect moment, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see an elegant man, approximately 50 years old, approaching. Sarah recognized him immediately and felt her heart race. Sebastian, she whispered. Hola, the Velvet Rose, he said, with the British accent she had never forgotten. I came as soon as I saw the video. Sebastian Vance had been Sarah's dance partner during the best years of her career. Together they had won competitions all over Latin America and planned to conquer Europe when the tragedy happened. How did you know? She asked. The video is already going viral worldwide, he explained. My students in London called me saying you had returned. I took the first flight. You came from London just because of the video? Asked Julian, impressed. I came because this woman, said Sebastian, pointing at Sarah, is the reason I fell in love with the tango. She taught me that dancing isn't just moving the body, but touching the soul. Sarah felt her legs tremble again, but this time for a completely different reason. Seeing Sebastian brought back memories of a time when life was full of possibilities, when dancing was as natural as breathing. Sebastian, she began, but couldn't finish. I know, he said, stepping closer. I know the pain you've carried all these years. I carried my share too. When you disappeared, a part of me disappeared with you. You had your own career, protested Sarah. You didn't need to. My career was never the same without you, he interrupted. For 20 years I tried to find a partner who connected with me the way you did. I never could. The atmosphere in the hall was growing increasingly charged with emotion. People were witnessing not just the return of a great dancer, but the reunion of lives that had been torn apart by tragedy. "And now?" asked Daisy. "What happens now?" Sarah looked around. She saw Martha, her teacher and mentor, with eyes full of hope. She saw Evelyn and Daisy, representing the generations she had inspired. She saw Gregory, ready to open doors that had long been closed. She saw Sebastian, representing a past that might still have a future. And she saw Julian, the man who had tried to humiliate her and had ended up giving her the push she needed to find herself again. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I spent so long running from who I was that I don't know how to be her again." "You don't need to go back to being who you were," said Martha. "You need to discover who you've become. The pain taught you things too. Life experience has value." "Lily wrote in the letter," Evelyn reminded her. "She said for you to teach other girls like her." "I have a concrete proposal," said Julian. "Not just a dance academy. I want to create an institute, the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts, a place where young talents can learn not just to dance, but to handle pressure, competition, the difficulties of artistic life." Sarah felt her heart stop for a moment. "Lily's name?" she whispered. "She deserves to be remembered," said Julian. "And you deserve to honor her memory in the most beautiful way possible, by passing on everything she admired in you." "I could help with the technical side," offered Gregory. "I know all the contacts in the dance world. We can bring in international teachers, organize exchanges, create opportunities for the students." "And I could be one of the first teachers," said Daisy. "I've always dreamed of working alongside the woman who inspired me to start." "The velvet rose," said Sebastian, extending his hand. "Quieres bailar conmigo otra vez?" Sarah looked at the outstretched hand. It was more than an invitation to dance. It was an invitation to start over, to forgive herself, to honor Lily's memory in the most fitting way. "I can't," she said, but without the conviction from before. "Of course you can," said a young woman's voice. Everyone turned and saw a girl of about 16 approaching. She looked just like Lily at that age, with dark hair and bright eyes. "Who are you?" asked Sarah, feeling a shiver. "I'm Amber Wright," the girl replied. "Evelyn's granddaughter, Daisy's niece, and your biggest fan." Sarah looked at Evelyn, who smiled with tears in her eyes. "Amber started dancing when she was 5, Evelyn explained. "I always said I wanted to be just like her mother's teacher. Professor Esperanza," said Amber in Spanish. "I've watched every single one of your videos on Global Video. You are my hero." "Global Video?" asked Sarah, confused. "Someone digitized your old performances," explained Tiffany. "There are millions of views. Young people from all over the United States dream of dancing like you used to." "Like I used to," repeated Sarah, emphasizing the past tense. "Like you dance," corrected Amber. "I saw today's video. You haven't lost a thing. You're better than ever." "Please," begged the girl, "accept me as your student. I promise I will dedicate myself like no one ever has." Sarah looked at that girl who reminded her so much of Lily and felt something stirring inside her chest, something that had been asleep for a long time. "Amber," she said softly, "dancing isn't just about technique. It's about feeling, about passion, about being willing to give your soul to every movement." "I know," replied the girl. "That's why I want to learn from you. Because I know you dance with your soul." "Esperanza," called Sebastian again. "Lily would be proud of you today. You honored her memory in the most beautiful way possible, by showing the world that love is stronger than pain." Sarah closed her eyes and could almost feel Lily's presence beside her, whispering the words from the letter. "Dance for me." When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Her posture was different, her shoulders firmer, her gaze more determined. "I accept," she said, first looking at Amber, then at the others. "I accept opening the institute. I accept teaching again. I accept honoring Lily the way she deserved." The hall erupted in applause again, but this time it was applause of celebration, not of admiration for the performance, but of joy for a life that was being reclaimed. "And I accept dancing with you again," she said to Sebastian, finally taking his hand. "A horror?" he asked, smiling. "Now," she confirmed. Nathan, the violinist, without needing instruction, began to play a classic Argentine tango. This time, however, it wasn't a forced performance or a humiliating challenge. It was a celebration. Sarah and Sebastian positioned themselves in the center of the hall, and when they began to dance, it was as if 20 years had vanished. The connection was even deeper than before, tempered by experience, by pain overcome, by maturity earned. As they danced, Sarah could feel Lily's presence in every movement, not as a painful shadow, but as an inspiration, as an eternal partner who had finally found peace. "Thank you," she whispered, not to Sebastian, but to the daughter she knew was watching from somewhere. The music ended, and this time there was no awkward silence. The applause began immediately, warm and sincere. Julian approached, still in awe of everything he had witnessed. "So, do we have a deal?" he asked. "We do," replied Sarah, "but on one condition." "What?" "You will be my first adult student," she said, smiling. "You need to learn to dance properly if you're going to be the sponsor of a tango academy." Julian laughed for the first time that night, a genuine, relaxed laugh. "I accept," he said, "but I warn you, I'm a terrible student." "Everyone is at the beginning," replied Sarah. "The secret is to have patience and never give up. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Vivian, who had watched everything from the hall's entrance unnoticed, approached hesitantly. Her face showed a mixture of shame and curiosity. "I'm sorry," she said to Sarah. "My behavior was unforgivable." Sarah studied her for a moment. The woman who had tried to humiliate her earlier in the evening now stood before her, vulnerable and remorseful. "Everyone deserves a second chance," said Sarah, "including myself. You forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive," Sarah replied. "You were protecting your territory, your marriage, I understand." "My marriage," said Vivian, looking at Julian, "wasn't threatened by you. It was threatened by my own insecurity." Julian stepped closer to his wife and took her hand. "Vivian," he said, "I want you to be the Velvet Rose's first student too." "Me?" she asked, surprised. "But I don't know how to dance at all." "Neither do I," Julian answered. "We'll learn together." It was a moment of reconciliation that no one had expected. The couple who had begun the evening distant were now uniting through a shared experience. "It would be an honor to teach you," said Sarah. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Tiffany's video had gone viral internationally with over 50 million views. Television producers, journalists, and business people from all over the world wanted to know the story of the ballerina who had resurrected her career at 45. Sarah, however, kept her focus on what truly mattered, preparing for the opening of the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts. The chosen location was an old, abandoned theater in downtown New York City. Julian not only purchased the property, but invested a fortune in its renovation, creating dance studios equipped with the most modern facilities, plus dormitories for students from other states and even countries. "This isn't just a dance school," he explained to the journalists. "It's a complete training center, where young talents can develop not only their dance technique, but also the discipline, perseverance, and emotional intelligence needed to handle an artistic life." Martha was hired as the pedagogical director, bringing her decades of experience in dance education. Gregory took on the artistic direction, using his contacts to establish partnerships with international dance companies. Daisy became the teacher responsible for intermediate and advanced levels, while Amber, still a student, was accepted as the Institute's first full scholarship recipient. "It's as if Lily were orchestrating everything from heaven," commented Evelyn during one of the planning meetings. "Every person who appeared that night had a specific role in rebuilding the Velvet Rose's life." Sebastian, who had postponed commitments in London, stayed in New York to help prepare the first teachers. His presence in Sarah's life was a source of constant media speculation, but both maintained discretion about the nature of their relationship. "We are dance partners," Sarah would say when questioned. "The rest is our business." The truth, however, was more complex. 20 years had passed and both had changed. The love that had existed between them had evolved into something deeper, a mutual understanding, a connection that transcended the romantic. "I don't want to repeat the past," Sarah said to him one afternoon during rehearsal. "I want to build something new." "Yo también," replied Sebastian, "pero quiero construir contigo." 3 months after that night at the Grand Imperial Hotel, the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts was ready to open its doors. The inauguration ceremony would be a grand charity gala, with performances by the best dancers from the United States and the United Kingdom. "Are you nervous?" asked Evelyn, finding Sarah backstage at the renovated theatre. "Terrified," she admitted. "I haven't danced in public for 20 years, and now I'm going to perform for 1,000 people." "Lily would be proud," said Evelyn, adjusting Sarah's dress. The dress was an exact replica of the one Lily wore in the last performance they did together. Sarah had initially resisted the idea, but Martha convinced her it would be a beautiful tribute. "She always said red was her color," continued Evelyn. "She said when you danced in red, it was like there was fire in your veins." Sarah smiled, touching the silky fabric. "She was only 16 when she said that," she recalled. "But she spoke as if she were a wise old woman." "In many ways she was," agreed Evelyn. "The letter she left for you is proof of that." The orchestra began playing the gala's opening piece. Sarah could hear the murmurs from the audience, which included celebrities, politicians, business people, and most importantly, hundreds of young dancers who had come from across the country to attend the event. "It's time," said Sebastian, appearing beside her. He looked exceptionally elegant in a black tuxedo, his graying hair perfectly combed, his eyes shining with the same passion from 20 years ago. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "No," she answered honestly. "But let's go anyway." They walked onto the stage under a shower of applause. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Sarah looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces, Julian and Vivian in the front row, now visibly closer, Daisy and Amber in the seats reserved for teachers, Martha and Gregory at a side table, and scattered throughout the audience, young faces full of hope and admiration. "Good evening," Sarah said into the microphone when the applause finally subsided. 20 years ago I stopped dancing because I thought I had lost everything that gave my life meaning. Today, I am here to say I was wrong." She paused, looking at the photo of Lily projected on a screen behind her. "My daughter Lily taught me that true love does not end with physical separation. It transforms, evolves, finds new ways to express itself. The Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts is my way of turning pain into something beautiful, of honoring my daughter's memory in the most fitting way, by teaching other young people to discover the magic of dance." The applause started again, but Sarah raised her hand to quiet them. "Tonight, for the first time in 20 years, I will dance not with sadness but with joy, not for what I lost but for what I have found again. This dance is dedicated to Lily, but also to all the young people here tonight, dreaming of touching people's hearts through art." The music began, Por una cabeza, the same song from that transformative night at the hotel. But this time, every note sounded different, filled not with pain but with renewed hope. Sarah and Sebastian began to dance, and immediately the audience knew they were witnessing something special. It wasn't just a technically flawless performance, but a story being told through every movement. The dance told the story of a woman who had lost everything and found herself again. It spoke of love, loss, redemption, and hope. Each step was a word, each turn a sentence, each pause a moment for reflection. When they reached the climax of the music, Sarah executed the same move she had made that night at the hotel, but this time with a completely different meaning. It was not a display of technical superiority, but a declaration of freedom, of self-forgiveness, of acceptance of life in all its complexity. The music ended with Sarah in a pose that mirrored exactly the photo of Lily being projected. Mother and daughter, separated by time but united by eternal art. The silence that followed was absolute. And then, starting from somewhere in the back of the audience, someone began to clap. Others joined until the entire theatre erupted in an ovation that lasted nearly 10 minutes. Sarah, still in her final pose, let the tears flow freely. But they were different tears from the ones she had cried for 20 years. They were tears of gratitude, of wholeness, of peace finally found. When she finally straightened up, she saw that many people in the audience were also crying. Julian was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, while Vivian clung to his arm, completely overcome with emotion. Daisy was filming everything, but her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold her phone. Amber was on her feet, applauding with a passion that reminded her of Lily at that age. "Thank you," said Sarah into the microphone when the applause finally died down. "Thank you for allowing me to return to who I really am. And now let's begin a new story." The months that followed were a period of steady growth for the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts. Young people from all over the United States and even from other countries in Latin America signed up for classes. The classes filled up quickly, and it became necessary to expand the facilities. "We need to hire more teachers," said Gregory during a meeting. "We have a waiting list with over 1,000 names." "Quality over quantity," replied Sarah. "I'd rather teach 50 students well than teach 500 poorly." "But it's a shame to waste so much interest," commented Daisy. "Then let's think of other ways to reach these people," suggested Sebastian. "What about workshops in other cities? Weekend intensive courses?" The idea was well received, and soon the Institute was organizing events across the country. Sarah traveled constantly, taking her teachings to places where talented young people had no access to quality arts education. At one of these workshops, in New Orleans, she met Tyler, a 15-year-old boy who danced in the streets to help his family. His talent was evident, but he had never had formal lessons. "Professor," he said after class, "do you think someone like me can really have a future in dance?" Sarah looked at that boy who reminded her of herself in her youth, full of dreams but doubting her own possibilities. "Tyler," she said, "talent knows no social class. What matters is dedication, passion, and the willingness to never give up." "But I don't have money to pay for lessons." "Who said you have to pay?" she interrupted. "The Institute offers full scholarships for students with your potential." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Really. But there's one condition. You'll have to work twice as hard as the other students to make up for lost time." "I accept," he said immediately. "I'll dedicate myself like no one ever has." The words were exactly the same ones Amber had spoken that night at the hotel. Sarah smiled, realizing how life had a poetic way of repeating itself. Tyler became one of the Institute's most dedicated students. Within 6 months, he was competing at a national level. In a year, he had won his first major competition. "You have a special gift for identifying talent," Martha said to Sarah during a student presentation. "It's not a gift," she replied. "It's experience. When you've been through the pain of losing everything, you learn to recognize what is truly worthwhile." The relationship between Sarah and Sebastian also continued to evolve. They had become not only dance partners but life companions, although they maintained separate apartments and personal independence. "We don't want to repeat past mistakes," Sarah explained to Evelyn in an intimate conversation. "When we were young, our passion for dance got mixed up with our passion for each other, and that created an unhealthy dependency. And now? Now we are two complete people who choose to be together. It's much more mature, more solid." "Would Lily approve?" Sarah smiled, touching the necklace with her daughter's photo that she always wore. "I think so. She was always wiser than me in matters of the heart." 2 years after the Institute's inauguration, Sarah received an invitation that moved her deeply. The Royal Albert Hall in London wanted to honor her with a special performance. "It's one of the most important venues in the world for tango," explained Gregory. "It would be a way to close the chapter on your career." "My career isn't closing," protested Sarah. "It's just beginning a new phase." Then it's a way to celebrate this new phase, he corrected. The performance in London was scheduled for the 2-year anniversary of Lily's death. Sarah initially hesitated, thinking it would be too painful. On the contrary, said Sebastian, it would be a perfect way to turn a sad date into a celebration of life. The preparation for the show took months. Sarah created a special choreography that told her own story, from her first steps at Martha's studio to rediscovering her passion for dance at the hotel. "Is it too autobiographical?" she asked Daisy during a rehearsal. "It's honest," replied the former student, "and that's exactly what people want to see. Your truth." Amber, now 18 and already a professional dancer, would be one of the participants in the performance, representing the new generation Sarah was nurturing. "Professor," she said during one of the final rehearsals, "you know you changed my life, right?" "You changed your own life," answered Sarah. "I just showed you some possibilities." "It's not just that," insisted Amber. "You taught me that dance isn't about being perfect. It's about being true." Those words echoed in Sarah's head in the days leading up to the trip to London. The night of the performance at the Royal Albert Hall was magical from the start. The audience was packed with the best of the tango world: international critics, famous dancers, entertainment executives. "Are you nervous?" asked Sebastian backstage. "No," she replied, and realized it was true. "For the first time in years, I'm not nervous before a performance. I'm at peace." "Lily is with you," he said, kissing her forehead. "I know," she answered, smiling. "I can feel her presence." The performance began with Sarah alone on stage, under soft lighting that created dramatic shadows. The music was instrumental, melancholic, evoking the years of pain and isolation. She danced her sadness, her guilt, her hopelessness. Every movement expressed a feeling she had held inside for years. When she reached the climax of this first part, she fell to her knees, symbolizing the moment she had decided to give up everything. Then the music changed. It became more hopeful, and Sebastian entered the stage. The dance now showed the reunion, the rediscovery, the forgiveness. Other dancers joined them, Daisy representing continuity, Amber symbolizing the new generation, Tyler showing that talent can come from anywhere. The grand finale was a collective choreography where everyone danced together, representing how art can unite people from different backgrounds, ages, and experiences in a single expression of beauty. When the music ended, the entire hall rose in a standing ovation that lasted 15 minutes. Sarah, at the center of the stage, looked at the audience and saw not just admiration but love. Love for the art, for the story she had told, for the courage she had shown. "Thank you," she said into the microphone in Spanish, "for allowing me to come home." London had always been her second home, the place where she had learned that tango was more than a dance. It was a philosophy of life. Backstage, after the performance, Sarah was approached by a journalist from Argentina's most important dance magazine. "Ms. the Velvet Rose," he said, "this performance wasn't just about your comeback. It was about transformation, about how pain can be turned into art. What message would you like to leave for young dancers who are going through difficulties?" Sarah Miller thought about the question for a moment. "I would like to say that pain is part of life, but it doesn't have to be the end of our story," she replied. "I thought I had lost everything when I lost my daughter, but in truth I had only lost one way of expressing my love for her. When I found a new way by teaching other young people, I discovered that love continues, it transforms, but it never ends. And what legacy would you like to leave?" "That there is no age limit for starting over, that it's never too late to forgive yourself, and that art has the power to heal wounds that seemed incurable." Back in the United States, Sarah found the Institute busier than ever. The performance in London had generated international repercussions, and invitations were arriving from all over the world. "We have proposals to open branches of the Institute in Chicago, Miami, and Atlanta," said Gregory, "and we've also received invitations from London, Rome, and even Paris." "It's tempting," admitted Sarah, "but I don't want the Institute to lose its essence. I prefer to grow slowly and maintain the quality." "What about starting with Chicago?" suggested Daisy. I could run the branch there, applying exactly the same methodology as here. The idea was developed over months, and on the Institute's 3rd anniversary, the Chicago branch was inaugurated with great success. Julian, who had become not only a patron but a close friend of Sarah's, continued investing in the project's expansion. "You changed my life," he said in a conversation during an institute party. "Before I met you, I thought success was just money in the bank. Now I understand that success is positively impacting people's lives." "You impacted my life too," replied Sarah. "That night at the hotel, when you offered me that humiliating challenge, you forced me to rediscover who I really was." "It wasn't intentional," he admitted, laughing. "I was being an arrogant idiot." "Sometimes arrogant idiots do exactly what we need," she said, also laughing. Vivian, who had become one of the Institute's most dedicated students, approached them. "What are you laughing about?" she asked. "About how life has mysterious ways of putting us on the right path," replied Sarah. "It's true," agreed Vivian. "If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd be dancing tango competitively, I'd have said they were crazy." Vivian and Julian had become a respectable pair in the amateur dance world. They didn't win competitions, but they had fun and had greatly strengthened their marriage through the shared activity. "Dance saved our marriage," said Julian. "It taught us to connect again, to work as a team, to have patience with each other." One afternoon, 5 years after that transformative night at the hotel, Sarah was in her office at the Institute when she received an unexpected visit. It was a young woman about 25 years old who looked very much like Lily. "Excuse me," said the young woman. "My name is Grace Miller. I was a friend of Lily's." Sarah felt her heart race. "Grace?" She repeated the name. "Lily talked about you a lot. You studied together, didn't you?" "Yes," confirmed Grace with tears in her eyes. "I was in the car with her on the day of the accident." Sarah's world stopped. All those years, she had never sought to know the details of what happened on that terrible day. You were there?" she asked, her voice almost disappearing. "I was the driver," said Grace, beginning to cry. "It was my fault. Everything was my fault." Sarah rose from her chair, not knowing whether she wanted to hug the young woman or run away. "Lily asked me to bring you to the jewelry store," continued Grace. "She wanted to buy a special pendant for her birthday, something that represented the two of you dancing together." "She was going to give me a gift," whispered Sarah. "The most beautiful one I've ever seen," replied Grace, taking a small box from her purse. "I saved it from the car before the firefighters arrived. I've kept it all these years, hoping I'd have the courage to look for you." Grace opened the box, revealing a gold pendant shaped like 2 ballerinas, one larger and one smaller, dancing together. "She said the two of you would be eternal dance partners," Grace continued, "that not life nor anything could separate them." Sarah took the pendant with trembling hands. It was exactly the kind of gift Lily would choose, symbolic, meaningful, full of love. "Grace," she said softly, "what happened wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was," protested the young woman. "If I hadn't agreed to drive her, if you hadn't agreed, she would have gone by bus or by taxi or asked someone else." Lily was determined. When she decided on something, nothing could stop her. Grace kept crying, but Sarah moved closer and hugged her. "Have you carried this guilt all these years?" she asked. "Every single day," replied Grace. "I couldn't drive anymore. I couldn't sleep properly anymore. I couldn't be happy anymore. Because I stole from you the most wonderful daughter in the world." "You didn't steal anything from me," said Sarah firmly. "Accidents happen, and Lily wouldn't want you to destroy your life because of her." "How can you forgive me?" "Because I've learned that forgiveness isn't about the other person," Sarah replied. "It's about ourselves. And because Lily was very fond of you. She always talked about her friend Grace, who was so fun, so loyal, such a good person." The two women held each other for long minutes, crying together, but this time they were tears of relief, of release. "Grace," Sarah finally said, "would you like to watch a class? See what we're doing here at the Institute?" I don't know if I could," replied Grace. "Seeing young people Lily's age, maybe that's exactly what you need," suggested Sarah. "To see that life goes on, that other young people are achieving dreams, that Lily continues to inspire people. Grace hesitantly agreed. During Amber's class with the advanced students, she sat in a chair in the corner, watching silently. "Professor," said Amber after the class, approaching Sarah, "who is that young woman who was watching?" "A friend of Lily's," replied Sarah. "Oh," said Amber, understanding immediately. "Does she want to talk to me?" "Why?" "Because sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who didn't know the person we lost. No history, no preconceptions." Sarah was impressed with Amber's maturity, now 23 and already considered one of the best dancers of her generation. "Would you like to meet her?" she asked Grace. The conversation between Amber and Grace lasted 2 hours. When they finished, Grace seemed like a different person. "What did you talk about?" asked Sarah, curious. "She told me about Lily," replied Amber, "about how funny she was, how she loved imitating the teachers, how she dreamed of dancing at the Royal Albert Hall one day." "And did that help?" "It helped because it made me realize Lily was a real person, with real dreams," said Grace. "All these years, I could only think of her as the victim of my mistake. I forgot she was a girl full of life, full of plans, full of joy. And now? Now, I want to honor her memory the right way," replied Grace, determined. "I want to live the life she couldn't live. I want to be happy for both of us." Grace became a regular visitor at the Institute. Not as a student, she never had a knack for dance, but as a volunteer, helping with event organization and providing emotional support to the younger students. "Lily would be happy to know you two have reunited," said Evelyn one afternoon when she visited the Institute. "I think she orchestrated this reunion," replied Sarah. "Lily always knew how to bring people together." On the 6th anniversary of the Institute, a grand celebration was organized. Former students returned to perform, showing how their careers had evolved. Tyler, now 21, had just signed a contract with a European company. Amber had become not only an excellent dancer, but also a respected choreographer. "Professor," said Tyler during the party, "do you remember what you told me when we met in New Orleans?" "I remember," replied Sarah. "I said you would have to work twice as hard as the others." "Exactly. And I worked 3 times as hard," he said, laughing. "But it was worth every minute. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "The credit is all yours," replied Sarah. "I merely opened the door. You had the courage to walk through it." During the party, Sebastian approached Sarah with a mysterious expression. "I have a surprise for you," he said. "What kind of surprise?" she asked, suspicious. "A good one," he assured her. "Come with me." Sebastian led her to the Institute's main stage, where all the guests could see them. "The Velvet Rose," he said into the microphone. "For 6 years you have transformed not only your own life, but the lives of hundreds of young people. You've created a legacy that will last for generations." Sarah looked at him, not understanding where he was going with this. "That is why," Sebastian continued, "I would like to ask a very important question." He knelt on the stage, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Will you marry me?" The entire hall fell silent. Sarah looked at the man who had been her dance partner, her first love, her journey companion. "Sebastian," she said softly, "get up." He obeyed, but kept the box extended. "It's not just about us," he explained. "It's about setting an example for our students, that it's possible to find true love, even after loss, even after pain, even after 50. Sarah looked at the audience and saw anxious faces waiting for her answer. She saw Julian and Vivian holding hands, smiling. She saw Daisy and Amber embracing, rooting for her. She saw Martha, now 75, with tears of joy in her eyes, and she saw Grace, who whispered, "Lily would approve." "Yes," Sarah said finally, "I will marry you." The hall erupted in applause and shouts of joy. Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the orchestra began to play Por una cabeza. "One last dance before we officially become engaged?" he asked. "The first of many," she replied. As they danced on stage, Sarah looked up and whispered, "Thank you, Lily, for teaching me that love never ends, it only transforms." A year later, Sarah and Sebastian were married in an intimate ceremony in the Institute's garden. All the students, former students, teachers and friends were present. The ceremony was conducted by a priest who was also passionate about tango and who incorporated elements of the dance into the liturgy. "Do you promise to dance together, not only on stage, but in life?" asked the priest. "Yes," they replied in unison. "To support each other's dreams?" "Yes." "To forgive the missteps and celebrate the perfect moves?" "Yes." When they were declared husband and wife, they danced their first waltz as a married couple to the sound of La Comparsita, played by the Institute's orchestra. After the ceremony, during the party, Sarah slipped away for a few minutes for a moment of private reflection. She walked to the garden, where a small statue in honor of Lily stood, installed on the foundation's first anniversary. "My daughter," she said, touching the statue, "I did it. I managed to turn our pain into something beautiful. I managed to honor your memory in the most fitting way. And I managed to be happy again, without guilt." "She is proud of you," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned and saw Evelyn, elegant in her party dress. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because a mother always knows when her daughter is proud," replied Evelyn. "And because anyone who knew you would be proud of what you've built. Sometimes I still miss her in a way that hurts," admitted Sarah. "And you always will," said Evelyn. "But now the pain coexists with joy, and that is healthy." "Lily always said she wanted to see me happy," Sarah remembered. "Then she got what she wanted," concluded Evelyn. 10 years after that transformative night at the Grand Imperial Hotel, the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts had branches in 12 U.S. cities and 3 international ones. Over 1,000 young people had passed through its classrooms, many of them now professional dancers, recognized worldwide. Sarah, at 55, continued to dance and teach with the same passion as on the first day. Sebastian had become not only her husband but her partner in every sense, sharing the administrative responsibilities of the foundation. "I never imagined I would get this far," she said during an interview for a documentary about her life. "What drives you to continue?" asked the journalist. "The certainty that every young person we teach carries a little bit of Lily with them," she replied. "When I see a student discover their passion for dance, when I see someone overcome their limitations through art, I know my daughter is still alive, still inspiring, still dancing." "And your plans for the future?" "To keep dancing as long as my legs hold out," she answered, laughing. "And when they don't hold out anymore, to keep teaching as long as my mind works. Art has no retirement age." That evening, after the interview, Sarah and Sebastian were at home, relaxing after another intense day of work. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. "About what?" she replied. "About stopping dancing for 20 years. About losing so much time." Sarah thought about the question for a moment. "No," she said finally, "because those 20 years of pain were necessary for me to become the person I am today. If I hadn't gone through all that, I wouldn't have the sensitivity to understand others' pain. I wouldn't have the maturity to handle the foundation's challenges. I wouldn't have the perspective to value every moment of joy." "That's a beautiful way to see it," commented Sebastian. "It's the only way of seeing that allows me to move forward," she replied. "Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about transforming pain into something useful." That same night across town, Amber was rehearsing for her next performance. Now 28, she had become one of the leading representatives of Brazilian tango on the international stage. As she danced, she thought about everything she had learned from Sarah over the years, not just dance techniques but life lessons about perseverance, about how to turn difficulties into opportunities. "Professor," she murmured to herself, executing a particularly complex move, "I hope I'm making you proud." In Chicago, Tyler was finishing another class at the foundation branch he had opened with Sarah's support. At 26, he had become not only a respected dancer, but a passionate educator, replicating the methodology he had learned in New York City. "Professor Tyler," said a student at the end of the class, "how do you manage to convey so much emotion when you dance?" "I learned from the best teacher in the world," he replied. "She taught me that technique without emotion is just gymnastics. Emotion without technique is just catharsis, but when you bring the two together, that's when you have art. In London, Daisy ran the UK branch of the Institute with the same dedication she had learned from her first teacher. At 40, she had found in artistic management a way to honour everything Sarah had taught her. Professor the Velvet Rose always said, she remarked to a student, that teaching isn't just about passing on knowledge, it's about inspiring transformation. Back in New York City at the main institute, a new class of beginners was having its first lesson. Among the students was a 15-year-old girl who strongly reminded Sarah of Lily, the same determination in her gaze, the same way of tilting her head when focused, the same evident passion for dance. "What's your name?" Sarah asked the girl. "Hope," she answered. "Hope Miller." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The name, the age, even the surname were too many coincidences. "Did your parents choose that name for a special reason?" she asked. "My mother said she gave me that name because I was born at a time when she had lost all hope in life," the girl explained. "Then I arrived and brought hope back to her." "And what brought you here?" "I saw a video of you on Global Video," Hope replied. "You were dancing at the theatre in London. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. I knew at that moment I wanted to dance like you." Sarah smiled, feeling once again the invisible hand of Lily orchestrating events. "Hope," she said, "welcome to the Institute. Let's discover together what you're capable of." In the weeks that followed, it became clear that Hope had exceptional talent, not just for dance, but for understanding the emotions each movement should express. "She reminds me of someone," Sebastian said to Sarah after a class. "I know," she replied. "Sometimes it's as if Lily had returned, but in a different version, with her own personality." "Do you believe in reincarnation?" he asked. "I don't know," Sarah answered honestly. "But I believe special souls find ways to keep touching the world, even after they're gone." 6 months after starting lessons, Hope was ready for her first public performance. The event was to be a benefit gala for underprivileged youth interested in dance. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked the girl backstage. "A little," Hope admitted. "But I'm also excited. I feel I was born for this." "How so?" "Ever since I was tiny, I've dreamed that I'm dancing on a big stage with lots of people watching," the girl explained. "And in my dreams, there's always a woman applauding me from the audience, a young woman in a white dress." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. "This woman, would you recognize her if you saw a picture?" "I think so," Hope answered. "Why?" Sarah took from her necklace the small picture of Lily she always carried with her. "Is it her?" she asked, showing the photo. Hope looked at the image and her eyes widened. "It's her," she exclaimed. "That's exactly her. Who is she?" "She was my daughter," Sarah replied softly. "Lily. She also dreamed of being a great ballerina." "What happened to her?" asked Hope, sensing the answer would be painful. "She left us far too soon," said Sarah, choosing her words carefully. "But she left a lot of good behind. This institute, for example, is a tribute to her." "Is that why it's called the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts?" asked Hope. "Exactly." The girl was silent for a few moments, processing the information. "Professor," she said finally, "may I dedicate my performance tonight to her?" "I'm sure Isabella would be honored," replied Sarah, embracing the student. Esperanza's performance was an absolute success. At 15, she demonstrated an artistic maturity that impressed even the most demanding critics in the audience. "We have a new star being born," commented Gregory with Sarah during the applause. "We have a new hope," she corrected, making a play on the girl's name. After the performance, several people sought out Esperanza to congratulate her. Among them was Grace, who had become a constant presence at the Institute's events. "You dance with a very ancient soul," Grace said to the girl, "as if you already knew things that are only learned with years of experience." "Sometimes I feel like I've danced before," agreed Esperanza, "as if my body already knew the movements before my mind even learned them." Grace looked meaningfully at Sarah, who just smiled. "Some things don't need explanation," said Sarah. just acceptance. The years passed, and Esperanza became not only the best student at the institute, but a kind of symbol of continuity. She embodied everything Isabella had represented, but with her own unique personality. At 18, she won her first international competition. At 20, she was already considered one of the best tango dancers in the world. But most importantly, she never lost the humility, sweetness, and dedication she had shown from the very first day. "Professor," she said to Sarah on the day of her graduation from the institute, "I want you to know that everything I've achieved is because of your teachings." "You achieved it because of your own talent and dedication," replied Sarah. "I just showed you some possibilities." "You always say that," said Esperanza, laughing. "But I know it's more than that. You taught me to dance with my soul, not just with my body." "And you will teach others to do the same," said Sarah. "That's how knowledge endures, how art stays alive through the generations." "I will always carry your teachings with me," promised Esperanza, "and I will always remember Isabella, even though I never met her personally." "She knows you," said Sarah, touching the young woman's heart, "and she is proud." On the 15th anniversary of the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts, a grand celebration was organized, bringing together former students from all over the world. Tyler came from Chicago, where he managed 3 branches of the institute. Daisy came from London with her team. Amber, now 33 and a mother of 2 daughters, was present with her whole family. 15 years, said Martha, now 80 years old but still lucid and involved. Who would have thought that night at the hotel would result in all this? Isabella knew, replied Sarah. She always knew that love finds ways to multiply. And now? Asked Julian, who at 70 continued to be one of the Institute's main supporters. What are the plans for the next 15 years? To keep doing what we've always done, replied Sarah. Transform lives through art. Teach young people not just to dance, but to dream, to persevere, to believe in themselves. And you? Asked Vivian. Don't you think about retiring? From dance, never, replied Sarah, laughing. They can carry me dancing off the stage when I die. Don't talk about that, protested Sebastian. We still have many dances ahead of us. Many, agreed Sarah. And each one will be a tribute to all who came before us, and an inspiration for all who will come after us. During the party, Esperanza approached Sarah with a serious expression. Professor, she said, I need to tell you something important. What is it? Asked Sarah, noticing the seriousness in her tone. I've received an offer to join the National Tango Company of the United Kingdom, said the Velvet Rose. It's a dream come true, but it also means moving from London for at least 2 years. Sarah Miller felt a pang in her heart. The Velvet Rose had become like a daughter to her, and the idea of seeing her leave was painful. But like a true master, she knew that the growth of students sometimes required separation. It's an incredible opportunity, she said, forcing a smile. You must accept. Are you sure, ma'am? Asked the Velvet Rose. I could negotiate to stay for only a year. No, said Sarah firmly. You must go and stay for as long as necessary. That's how you build a solid international career. But the Institute, the classes, protested the Velvet Rose. The Institute will remain here, Sarah assured her. And when you return, you'll be an even better teacher because of the experience you'll gain. And if I don't return? You will return, said Sarah with conviction, because this is your home, and homes always call us back when we're ready. 3 months later, the Velvet Rose left for London amid many tears, but also with much hope. Sarah accompanied her to the airport, along with all her classmates and teachers from the Institute. Remember, said Sarah in their final embrace, you're taking a little piece of all of us with you, and you're bringing a little piece of there back here when you return. I will dance for all of you, promised the Velvet Rose, and I will make the name of the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts known throughout the world. 2 years passed. The Velvet Rose became the principal dancer of the British company and had travelled to various countries, always mentioning in interviews the American school where she had learned the fundamentals not only of dance, but of life. My teacher in the United States, she would say in every interview, taught me that dancing is a form of prayer. It's how you converse with the universe using your body. The Velvet Rose's words, repeated in international newspapers and magazines, brought worldwide recognition to the Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts. Young people from different countries began seeking information about courses and exchanges. Sarah, now 60 years old, remained active, but had begun delegating more responsibilities to the younger teachers. "It's time to train the next generation of leaders," she said to Sebastian Vance. "I can't carry the Institute on my back forever." "You never carried it alone," he reminded her. "You've always had an incredible team by your side." "True," she agreed. "And now it's time for that team to take on more responsibilities." Amber Wright was promoted to overall artistic director, supervising all branches of the Institute. Tyler became the director of international expansion, responsible for evaluating proposals for new branches in other countries. Daisy Wright took over pedagogical coordination, ensuring all units maintained the same standard of quality. "It's amazing how each of you has found your natural place in the organization," Sarah commented during a strategic planning meeting. "We learned by watching you," replied Amber. "We saw how each person has unique talents that should be used in the best possible way." "And we also saw that leading is not about giving orders," added Tyler. "It's about inspiring people to give their best." On the Institute's 20th anniversary, the Velvet Rose finally returned to the United States. She had become one of the most recognized dancers in the world, but maintained the simplicity and humility that had always characterized her. "Professor," she said, hugging Sarah at the airport, "I'm home." "Welcome back," replied Sarah, with tears of joy in her eyes. The 20th anniversary celebration party was the largest ever organized by the Institute. Government authorities, ambassadors from South American countries, international art critics, all were present to celebrate 2 decades of excellence in dancer training. The most emotional moment of the night was when Sarah and the Velvet Rose danced together for the first time. The chosen music was Por una cabeza, the same piece that had marked Sarah's return to dance on that transformative night at the hotel. "It's like watching the past and the future dancing together," commented someone in the audience. "Exactly," replied Grace, who never missed the Institute's major performances. "It's the continuity of art, of passion, of love, being passed from generation to generation." After the performance, Sarah was invited to speak to the audience. 20 years ago," she said into the microphone, "I was lost, destroyed by grief, convinced that my life had ended along with the death of my daughter Lily. Today, looking at all of you, I realize that life did not end. It multiplied." The audience applauded, but Sarah raised her hand to continue. "Every student who has passed through this institute carries a little bit of Lily with them. Every dance, every performance, every moment of joy you experience through art is a way of keeping her memory alive, and the memory of all the special people who have departed but continue to inspire us. The Lily Miller Foundation for the Performing Arts is not just a dance school," she continued. "It's a place where pain transforms into beauty, where dreams become reality, where every person discovers they are capable of far more than they imagine. Thank you to everyone who has been part of this journey. Thank you to the students who trusted us, to the teachers who dedicated their lives to art, to the supporters who believed in our mission. And a special thank you to Lily, who, even though she is not physically here, remains the inspiration for everything we do." The applause lasted 10 minutes. When it finally subsided, the orchestra began to play La Comparsita, and all the alumni present took to the stage for a great collective dance. Sarah, at the center of it all, looked around and saw dozens of young people dancing with passion, technique, and joy. She saw the Velvet Rose teaching some steps to a child who had climbed onto the stage. She saw Tyler dancing with a student who had just arrived from the countryside. She saw Amber with her young daughters, already beginning to teach the first steps to the next generation. "Lily," she whispered, looking upward, "we did it. We transformed our story of pain into a story of love, of hope, of continuity. Your legacy is alive in each of these young people." "She knows," said a voice beside her. Sarah turned and saw Sebastian, her life and art partner, smiling at her. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because I am seeing it through your eyes," he replied. "And in your eyes I see not just pride for what we have built, but peace. the peace of someone who has finally understood that love never ends, it only transforms. "I love you," said Sarah, kissing her husband. "Yo te amo también," he answered, "today, tomorrow, and for all eternity." The music continued, and they kept dancing, amid hundreds of people, yet connected only to each other and to the memory of Lily, who seemed to hover over them all like a blessing. This was exactly how life should be, an eternal dance between the past that shaped us, the present we live, and the future we build with every step. And when the music finally ended, no one wanted the night to be over, because everyone knew they had participated in something special, in a moment that would be forever etched in memory. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Sarah made the right decision by returning to dance? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.